Well, we're here with a man who doesn't need any introduction, but for the purposes of this, we'll introduce him, Sir Geoff Hurst. I was going to say until December, the only man to score a World Cup hat-trick in a final. He isn't anymore because Kylian Mbappe did it. But there's still a difference, isn't there, Geoff? Which is?
We were on the winning side.
You're on the winning side.
Which I always slot in now. And
And
many people know that anyway, particularly the English.
And to make it better, it was for England, and it was at Wembley as well. It was every box ticked. When you saw Mbappe do it, first of all, by the way, what a game, what a performance. Did you think...
From both teams and both players.
Unbelievable. Did you think, oh well, it's been a long innings, and I'm quite pleased in a sense that somebody else has done it?
Strangely enough, with about 10 minutes to go, I suddenly realised, amazing, it's exactly 10 minutes to go, somebody's going to get three. Didn't bother me that much, to be honest with you.
Because Messi was up for it as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, both players.
Yeah.
I was thinking, crikey, but two could do it. But to be honest with you, I've had a good run.
Yeah.
I've had a damn good run. Be part of history. And of course, our team, unfortunately, have not won it since. So I'm still living that as an English team that's won it. Although the Lionesses were very close.
Very close indeed. We'll talk about 66 in a moment. The obvious question to ask you, after seeing what Messi did, I'm a huge Messi fan. It's one of those great debates, Messi or Ronaldo. For me, it's Messi. But of course, people who aren't as old as me, let alone you, they always go on the present, don't they? And so a lot of people have anointed him as the greatest ever. You've had the privilege of playing against Pelé. It was a friend of yours. You've seen Maradona. You've seen all the Cruyff. You've seen George Best, of course. You've seen all the greats. Where would you place Messi? And I know it's a pub question, really, but who would be your sort of 1, 2, 3 in the greatest?
Well, the ones you mentioned are up there. It's very difficult to assess what you think. For me, I guess it depends on the time you're playing in. So I would always go back and look at Pelé as the greatest player, starting at 17. However, if you look today, between Ronaldo and Messi, it's always been very, very close. But I've always, a bit like in agreeing with you, think that Messi is arguably, I'd say, is the best player currently. But there've been some unbelievable players you mentioned over a period of time, fantastic. And I put Bobby Charlton amongst that as one of the greatest players that's played the game as well.
Yeah. So, Geoff, you played for West Ham 500 times. You scored 242 goals. Got a great record. I know you played for Stoke as well. And they were a great team. A bit inconsistent, weren't they? They could be the best in the country, and then occasionally you'd have some dodgy results. But you won the FA Cup. You won the European Cup Winners' Cup. That was, yourself, Martin Peters, Bobby Moore, Harry Redknapp. I mean, it was a great team in its own right, wasn't it?
It was a great team, and it was a great period for the club. I mean, we'd been in the second division, the late 50s. Then we get up into the first division, as was then, and then we go. Ron Greenwood comes in, who was a fantastic coach, stroke teacher, and he transformed the way we played, transformed the way I played, and Mauro played, and Martin played, and then winning at the two trophies, as you said. We hadn't been at Wembley since the opening of Wembley in 1923, so winning that. And winning the European trophy, that was only the second time at that stage a club had won a European trophy against a very good German side as well, who won the Bundesliga, I think, the year after. So that was no mean feat, that European trophy. And of course, the three of us played. And then, remarkably, this will take hard to beat, West Ham supplied 3 players for England to win a World Cup. Not just 3 players, the captain, Mauro, I regard as the best player I played with, and both goal scorers, Martin Peters and myself. And Martin was my next door neighbour. When we got married living in Hornchurch, he married lived just around the corner after me. His garden backed onto the side of mine, so my neighbour. So great times for the club. Great
Wonderful.
Times. We were, you said inconsistent. I think we were. I think obviously winning 2 trophies is absolutely magnificent. Probably the consistency we lacked during the league season. Probably looking at the squad we had and the players we had, you think we should have finished higher up on a more consistent basis. But having said that, to achieve what we achieved is unforgettable, really.
Now, they say in life it's all about timing. You made your debut for England in February 1966.
Yes.
Good time to start playing for England because you did enough to get into the World Cup squad, the World Cup at home, obviously, the 60s, the swinging 60s, etc., etc. But the first choice strike force as the World Cup began was Roger Hunt and the great Jimmy Greaves. Now, before we talk about Jimmy's World Cup story and your World Cup story, which is kind of connected, perhaps you'd like to remind people, when we talk about Harry Kane today and Wayne Rooney and Gary Lineker and all the great sort of more modern goal scorers, would you like to remind people how good Jimmy Greaves was? Because you were a great friend of his and a great admirer as well, weren't you?
Well, Jimmy Greaves' record still stands today in terms of goals in the league, 357 goals. I mean, they talk about Harry Kane, who's a fantastic player, and I admire him. He's just beaten Jimmy's record at Spurs. But you've got to remind people that when he was at Chelsea between 17 and 21, he played another 100-odd games, scored another 100-odd goals on top of that. So he was magnificent. I think just that period of time, I never dreamt, not people understand this, that I ever be picked for England. That was never on my radar. West Ham I thought could do well and enjoy my. It was never, and quite a surprise when Alf selected me for the game before Germany, where I didn't play, and then starting in February '66, and I'm then competing now with Jimmy Greaves and the great Roger Hunt from Liverpool, who was a Liverpool story, Roger Hunt, and they're the two players. And I don't think in the first few games that Alf could really make his mind up which two of the three that was going to be that way. I played one game. My first game was with Roger, the second game with Jimmy. So at that stage, and it looked like prior to the World Cup, with the numbers we were given, I was given 10, Jimmy 8, our club numbers, and Roger was given 22, the red shirt. So it looked prior to the World Cup. But on the tour in Scandinavia and Poland, I probably didn't score. Roger got 2, Jimmy got 4 against Norway, as usual. So he started off, and I always joke with an audience, he started off with those 2 average players, Roger Hunt and Jimmy Greaves. So I'm sitting on the bench, but sitting on the bench, my memories are very clear. I never thought I'd be picked for England. Sitting on the bench, whether you played Uruguay, I was happy to be there. I wasn't disappointed, upset, annoyed that I wasn't picked. I was happy, I'm thinking this, to be sitting on the bench in an England squad when we're playing in a World Cup. And that's how I felt. And very importantly, I'm ready to I'm not upset, I'm not a type which players can get, and people in life can get if they are left out doing things and they lose their discipline and are not ready to come back when the time football and other businesses. So I was ready to come in when sadly the great Jimmy Greaves damaged his shin against the French in one of the earlier rounds.
Yeah,
so
it was the third group game, wasn't it?
Third group game, he had a very badly gashed shin.
So he was out for the knockout stage. You came in for the quarter-final against Argentina,
yes,
and you scored the only goal,
yes,
which is quite a good thing to do.
Well, not bad. Didn't think I'd be picked, so I come in. We get to it all, but if you look at it, analyse it, I come in, I score the winner against Argentina, the only goal. I made the second against Portugal, and I scored 3 in the final. Yeah. So I took my chance.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think that's fair enough, Geoff. So you won the quarter-final 1-0 against the physical.
That was a great goal
Argentinians.
Getting back to the West Ham touch between Martin Peters playing with me, the two of us, his cross from the left-hand side for the header was straight off the West Ham training ground under Ron Greenwood. So I've got to mention that because that's such an important aspect.
Quick mention about the semi before we get onto the game. Semi, Portugal, the great Eusebio playing, Bobby Charlton in his pomp, doing what we all still remember him doing, firing them in. He was a midfielder. People forget he was a midfielder.
People do, and he'd remind him when we start talking about great goal scorers, Bobby Charlton was a midfield player, and he played over 100 games and scored 49 goals. Wayne Rooney and Harry Kane just beat him, but he was an out-and-out midfield player.
He didn't score average goals either, did he?
No. Oh, no. Fantastic. I mean, he's a great striker with ball, both feet. So that got us the win by both goals. Just mentioning Bobby, I think, slot this in. So Bobby scores 1 in 2 every game. He scores 2 in the semi-final. And in the final, Alf Ramsey thinks Beckenbauer's the big danger, and asks Bobby to mark Beckenbauer.
Yeah.
And Bobby, it's the biggest compliment I can say to Bobby Charlton, one of the greats. He scored a goal every other game. He's asked to mark somebody in the final.
Which kind of marked him out of the game as well.
Marked him out. And the manager of Germany, Helmut Schön, thought Bobby Charlton told Beckenbauer Bobby Charlton was our best player. So the two of the greatest players of any era virtually marked each other out of the game. Yeah. But the thing is, it's never 1 second did Bobby Charlton say, And a lot of players in that.
Find Bobby
Bobby
Charlton.
Charlton, I'm going to mark somebody in a final. I've scored 2 goals. And not for 1 second, then and throughout the rest of our lives together, did he ever mention that in a negative way. And that's one of the biggest compliments I could say from one of the greatest players.
Absolutely. Just before we get into the game, the World Cup final a few months ago in 2022, as it was, the world eyes on the players. The players can't go anywhere. They can't move anywhere. There's social media, billions of pounds, billions of eyes on the final, etc. What did you guys get up to the night before the World Cup final?
We went to see a film.
You went to the cinema?
Went to the cinema, yes. To the cinema to see a film, yes.
What did you go and see?
We went to see those magnificent men in their flying machines.
So the England squad went to see them. Went to the flicks on a Friday night.
Just walked to it in Hendon, and the astonishing thing about the difference in time. Can you imagine them walking today? There'd be a crowd of photographers and people. I can hardly remember anybody wanting an autograph during the film itself, and the walk there and back. I mean, quite astonishing.
Unbelievable.
Quite astonishing.
And what's the story about Nobby Stiles? He was looking for a church, wasn't he?
Yeah, the morning of the game, we obviously just relaxed indoors at lunch at 12 o'clock. But Nobby was looking for a church, and he finished up in Golders Green, which is a fairly Jewish area, apparently. He couldn't really find one. That's the great Nobby story.
So he went to a synagogue?
Yeah.
So Nobby went to a synagogue?
Or he went to a synagogue but couldn't get in or something.
Oh, really? On the morning of the World Cup final?
On the morning of the World Cup final. He finished up in Golders Green.
All right. Before we get into the game itself, you've mentioned a few names. They're all household known, be etched in sporting memory forever. And obviously, sadly, a lot of them aren't with us anymore. All friends of yours. Let's quickly go through them. Number 1, the goalie, Banksy, Gordon Banks. Some people say the greatest of all time.
Yes, you could argue he's the greatest goalkeeper of all time, best goalkeeper certainly in England, an absolutely fantastic goalkeeper and a great character. He always had a joke to tell you, everywhere you had a joke to tell you.
And people talk about, obviously, that save 4 years later, in 1970, against Pele, when he tips it over the bar and says, the greatest save ever, and Gordon Banks' greatest save ever. You beg to differ, don't you?
Yes, I do, and I always used to wind Banksy up. His best save was against me in the semi-final of the League Cup, when he saved a penalty. A minute to go at the end of the game, the penalty goes in, we win the tie over 2 legs with Stoke and get to the final.
And you hit it, don't you?
I hit it well. He hit his wrist, a strong part of his wrist, and just went over for a corner. We finished up then tying on 2 legs, and then 2 more games at Sheffield Wednesday and Man U. They eventually beat us, I think, 3-2 in the. And those 4 games, crazy, that took over a month.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, and I always say that was, and the Banksy save, arguably the greatest you could up against Brazil. It didn't make any difference to the result.
Yeah.
An important save is not just the save itself, but what impact it had on the game. The impact, Stoke knocking us out, the impact against Brazil went on to beat us 1-0 and go on. And the greatest, we were close to Brazil. They are arguably the greatest Brazilian side that's won it, Pele at his best and so on. But we were that only 1-0 in the early round, so we were that close. And I think bitterly disappointed when we didn't get any further.
Sure.
After the quarter-final.
Fullbacks always unsung heroes, aren't they? Ray Wilson, George Cohen, both very good at what they did.
Yeah, mainly more defensive than we see. We say more. The game has changed dramatically. Ray, I think, probably argues was one of our, not mentioned much, one of our worst class players. George Cohen was an absolutely fantastic, very strong player, ever present at Fulham.
Very fit, wasn't he?
Unbelievably fit. I mean, he comes from that family, the Cohen family.
Yeah. Ben Cohen, his nephew, wins the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, and in those days, no warm up. We didn't go on the pitch for 20 minutes of warm up. George's warm-up was about 100 knees up in the dressing room. And you see him do that. That was his warm-up. He was very powerfully built and a one-time player at Fulham and one of the nicest guys you could ever wish to meet.
Central defenders, icons.
Yeah, more I've talked about, the best player I played with. I think the combination, I think it's interesting picking Jack. I think Jack Charlton, that a lot of people felt maybe, or Jack maybe himself felt that took a long time to make his debut. He was pushing 30, but I think what Alf Ramsey was very good at picking players that could work together, and that central defensive partnership in any club in any league is very important. They work together as a team. Jack was particularly dominant in the air, as you know, and also scored quite a lot of goals, set pieces. And Bobby alongside was a great reader of the game. So that combination, and Jack of course was just an unbelievable character, not just a great player. I mean, fishing, all the stuff he did. After dinner speaking, he was a great after dinner speaker, did it forever. I'm so fond of him, and he was just an absolute fantastic guy to be with.
Let's talk about the midfield. You mentioned Nobby Styles.
Nobby Styles, a holding midfield player. He used to be an inside forward at Man United in the early days, like a scheming player, but then settled back into that defence. And a very important role then and now. That's not changed. That central midfield player, holding player that looks where the attacks are coming from and stops the defence getting under pressure. Absolutely important. And just the most wonderful lad. I actually grew up with him. We played for the under-17s of England together. So I go back a long way with Norbert, as he was called. We were very similar age.
Alan Ball, he was a youngster, wasn't he? He just ran and ran, didn't he?
Unbelievable ball, a great, most enthusiastic and positive player I've ever come across. Absolutely fantastic lad, as they all were.
Yeah.
But many people would regard him. They view that match latterly, many years later, and a couple of pundits that said he was the best man on the field.
Man of the match.
And I would not disagree with that. 21 years of age, he ran the left back absolutely ragged, absolutely fantastic, great character. Sadly, one of the early departures from this earth, and also his wife, which is blood.
Bobby Charlton, we've discussed already. World class player.
World class, one of the best ever.
Yeah.
I had to pick my 50 best players a year or two in a couple of books, and he was up there in the top 10.
Yeah.
The most two-footed player you've ever seen, which is fantastic if you could be that good on both feet. And even his brother Jack didn't know which was his best foot.
Is that right?
Jack's line.
Fantastic. And Martin Peters, your friend, your club colleague, your neighbour, scored a crucial goal in the World Cup final.
Martin, I don't think Martin in some respects gets enough credit to an extent. His goals per game is pretty good for West Ham, I think, because he went on to Spurs. And I think, and he nearly scored the winner in the final.
Yeah.
But I think I talk about players who don't score as many goals. When he scored his goal, he was standing from a corner. He was standing on the 6-yard box, and that's his goal. He was always there in the box. I think he's probably not regarded as a legend much at West Ham, which he should be, because he moved to Spurs, which is never good. It's always going to be a black mark against you. But his career at Spurs is very good. 1, 2, or 3 trophies there. Yeah. He actually scored 4 in a game once at Man U.
Yeah.
To remind people that he was a fantastic
and he's a midfielder
and midfield player. Yeah. Alf Ramsey didn't pick him for a long time, and Ron Green was throwing Martin down Alf's throat. You've got to pick this guy. He's terrific. And Alf said, "I'm not sure about him. I'm not sure whether he can head a ball." I mean, every man makes a mistake sometime, and Martin Peters was the best header of a ball at West Ham, both attacking and defensively. So it's nice an opportunity to speak about Martin, because I don't think he does in some respects. So I've got this feeling he should be regarded much higher.
Sure.
But a great career, both at West Ham and at Norwich. When he was early 30s, he was regarded as one of the best players they've ever had. There was a poll many years later, and he was regarded at mid-30s as one of the best players that Norwich have ever had.
Roger Hunt,
my wife would say that a lot of great lads. If she had to go out with 4 of us together with our wives, she'd pick Roger Hunt.
Over you?
No, well, I'm not sure. As long with me, the 4 of us.
Oh, I see. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, you're quite right. Great, a fantastic player and goal scorer for Liverpool. Just the most wonderful guy. And interesting, I talked about the numbers. He wore 22, so he wasn't necessarily initially in Alps, but he came in the early round. He scored 2 or 3 goals in the early rounds of the World Cup, and quite deserved to keep his place for the final.
So the final begins, okay. Doesn't go to plan, because the Germans actually take the lead. And then Bobby Moore, you've talked about Bobby Moore as a fantastic central defender. You know, he was much more than that, wasn't he? He produces, but quick thinking, took a quick free kick, didn't he? Caught the Germans out a little bit. Came to you rose and headed in the goal. 1-1, you scored a goal in the World Cup final. Fantastic. But there's a lot of work to be done. And then your pal Martin Peters gets to second in the second half, okay, and you're just a few minutes away from winning the World Cup, which at the time, because you didn't know how history would unfold, you would have been more than happy with.
Oh, we're happy with that.
You were 2-1 up, and then Weber, Wolfgang Weber scores a late goal. So you've won the World Cup, and now you've got to try and win it again in extra time. But of course, may I suggest that you should be thankful to Wolfgang Weber for the rest of your life, because it gave you the opportunity to do what you did in extra time.
Absolutely, yes. If Martin's goal wins, fantastic, and they've been great for him. But in fact, the Weber goal, if you look at it more closely, I think they talked about handball and stuff, but I thought one of their players touched it as it went across to Weber and slowed it down to enable him to score. I just meant that as a point. But of course, I think just getting back the Moro free kick, with someone we worked at West Ham as well. It's a quick free kick.
It's another West Ham training ground.
It's another West Ham training ground thing.
Yeah.
It's important to say that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get the full time. You're sitting down. The Germans are sitting down. This is where Alf comes into his own, doesn't he? Because he told you first of all that he got to get up.
Yes, we're now on the touchline. We're sitting down, and the Germans are across there sitting down. The first thing he said to us: "Get up, get up! Don't let the Germans see you're tired. Get up." Then he had words to one or two players about the last 30 minutes. Then he left us with a line which you all remember. He said, "You've beaten the Germans once, go and beat them again."
Brilliant.
And I think because we had such a fantastic, not talent, attitude in the team, never think we were going to get beat. That was very important. And many other teams against a great German side could have gone, oh, and maybe have folded. That happens in sport, in all sports.
Yeah, because it's a big setback, isn't it?
Yeah,
You concede so late
it's
in
a
the
huge
final.
setback. Bobby Charlton looked a bit disappointed when a close up on his face, but we had such a tough. Some world class players, but some very tough. I always call them hard-nosed professionals. Qualify that team. And of course, we come back and finish up winning it.
So now we come to something that happened 57 years ago, still talked about. If you want an argument with a German, bring this up. The famous third goal. The swivel, the shot, hits the underside of the bar, bounces down. Goal given after some consultation with the linesman. 3-2 England. Geoff Hurst scores his second, and people have argued about it ever since. I'm going to ask the question which you've probably been asked more than any other question your whole life. Was it a goal?
Strange enough, I was probably in the worst position of anywhere in the world, because as I hit it from my angle, almost sitting on my backside, but struck it very well from that position, it actually bounced from the bar immediately behind Tilkowski. So I had the worst view in the stadium, but naturally I'm up there with the hands in the air asking to score. Again, it was...
But Roger Hunt was near, wasn't he?
Roger Hunt was near. Roger Hunt always said that he felt it was over. He turned away and shouted goal, which may have helped. Nothing's really proved one way or the other. But I think overall, the important thing, it was fortunate to an extent if you argue the case, but overall we were the better team on the day, and I think coming off the team, it had been a bit of a disappointment. We think, well, we were second best on the day, but we weren't second best. The Germans always admitted we were the better team on the day. And finished up winning the score we probably should deserve to have done.
Well, then we come to that glorious moment. The Germans are having to press up, they're having to attack. It's nearly over. Again, Bobby Moore, the defender, 2 assists in the World Cup final, looks up, sees you, hoofs it towards you, and this is the bit I love, okay? Geoff Hurst, hat-trick here in the World Cup. You're going towards the goal. Ken Wolstenholme built his whole career on this moment as well. And what are you honestly thinking as you're going towards the goal with the ball?
I'm now thinking the game's nearly over. As the ball came to me initially from Moro, I'm back to goal. Look at the ref's 10 yards from me, and he's doing this, whistle in the mouth. I'm now thinking and knowing the game's nearly over. So I turn around, and I'm now at the edge of the box. I'm thinking the game is nearly over. I'm now going to whack this ball with everything I've got left, and I don't care if it finishes up in the crowd or the stand. And that was it. But as I jokingly say, I mishit it, and it flew in.
But it bobbled at the last minute.
It did. It bobbled up just quite nicely. So I caught the ball on your hard part of your instep. It gave it that extra power, rather than if it's on the deck, you're kicking with your toes, which is not so much power. But as it popped up, hitting it just there on the hard bit of your instep, made it extra power, of course, and it had it not hit it that well in the corner. It's funny, I say about the game was over and I'm going to finish it, hit it anywhere. A friend of mine said, a very good friend of mine years ago, he said, you should have said, when it came to that, you saw this little foot square in the left-hand corner and you hit it exactly where you wanted to. I said, that's a load of rubbish. I said, I just want to hit it as hard as I could.
So nobody was more surprised than you when the ball flew into the top corner?
Yes, yeah. But I knew the game was over. I knew the game, whatever whatever finished with the shot in the crowd when the game was finished.
Now, you've got a few years on me. I've got a few years on
Don't
a few
keep saying
others, but
that,
only a few, only a few. But we all, even if you weren't around, you remember Nobby dancing. You remember Bobby Moore. The Queen handing him the trophy, lifting up one-handed on his shoulders, going around. Does it seem like 57 years ago, or maybe in some cases it does, but in other cases it's still vivid?
It's still vivid memories of that day. The other memory of Bobby Moore going to collect the trophy off the Queen, he noticed that she had white gloves on, and Bobby was very immaculate as a player, as a person, always wore smart suits, and he saw she had white gloves, and he didn't want to get her gloves dirty, so before he took the trophy, he wiped his hands on the sort of velvet parapet just before he. Who does that on a day like that? That's Mora.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable presence and the way he thought about things.
Now, we're going to wrap up in a second, but the final thing, and I love this, again, going back to the 2022 analogy, Messi, etc., they win the World Cup, they are global superstars, all of them, it goes nuts and it continues to go nuts. Now, you had some celebrations, obviously, but you all kind of went your different ways that night that you won the World Cup. You ended up in a club, didn't you?
Well, the crazy thing was there was nothing really organised, particularly. Our wives, as many people are not sure, that we're not invited to this huge banquet after the hotel.
Which is unbelievable.
And the four semi-finalists, everybody there, and our wives not invited. I mean, can you just imagine that?
Yeah.
So I decided beforehand we need to do something. Nothing's organised, and this is a Saturday night after a game. We go out and enjoy ourselves, whatever, West Ham, anything else. So about a week before, when we realised to get to the final, I phoned up. I'd been to Danny LaRue's club about 2 or 3 months earlier in Hanover Square, and it was a good night. Ronnie Corbett then days was doing a little bit, and that was funny, and the food was good, so it stuck in my mind. So I phoned him up, and me stupidly thinking, I'm not sure whether they're going to let 4 or 5 World Cup players in, thinking it's a bit too late. Of course, they said okay. So I went with Nobby Stiles, Alan Ball, John Connelly, and our wives to. I mean, obviously, going in there, you're not really aware in a sense. You think we go to a club after the game, 4 or 5 World Cup winners, thinking when I phoned up, we wouldn't be able to get.
Wouldn't let you in.
Wouldn't let me in. That's it. Or it was too late to get booked. And that was just a fantastic night. It was great pictures of us around the table with all of us.
And you went home that night with your wife, okay? And the Sunday morning, the morning after you scored a hat-trick in the World Cup final for England at Wembley to win the Football World Cup, what did you do?
I did what I always did after a Saturday night. I went home on Sunday and cleaned my car and cut the grass.
So you cut the grass Sunday morning, having just won the Rugby World Cup. People walk past you, maybe go, oh, hi Geoff, well done yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't notice anybody saying well done.
I didn't even say that.
Perhaps nobody was out on a Sunday. That's.
You were literally just going up and down, doing your lawn on the Sunday morning.
Yeah, and cleaning the car. An Austin 1100, grey Austin 1100. Yes.
Did you? Love it, love it. It's maybe I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses. There's something quite nice about that. You might have taken the money, mind you. They have now, but you probably wouldn't have wanted all that fame that they have now.
Well, that was what it was at the time, and I look back on those times and that particular occasion, everything to do with that era, with great amusement, not with any bitterness about what happens today and what players get today, all that nonsense. So we played at a great time, winning the trophy, and to be part of that great team was a privilege and a pleasure. And I still talk about it from time to time.
Yeah.
As you'd expect, it was a great day.
It was a great day. Geoff, thank you so much.
One thing, Jack Charlton.
Yeah.
So nothing was organised. I think some went to the Playboy Club. We did what we did. Jack Charlton apparently finished up legless in some garden in East London or something.
In a garden?
Somewhere.
Did he?
As the story goes, you know.
That's very Jack Charlton.
That's very Jack Charlton, yeah. It was a great character. Fantastic.
Geoff, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers, Ian. Thank you.
I would say congratulations. It's 57 years.
It's a bit late. It's a bit late now.
But it's still congratulations. Well done, Geoff.
Thank you very much.
You did very well. Thank you.